Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. But enough about my favorite songs by the Beatles, the Smashing Pumpkins, and Orphan Annie. Let's chat about the chaos of time travel, where the smallest mistake could wipe out everything and everyone. Existential dread, here we come. Hey book readers, today I'm jumping into 10 more time travel books that'll have you questioning if you were always destined to forget to put on deodorant today. Because there's no better time than the present to crack open a great sci-fi novel. First up is a book that a bunch of y'all recommended to me, and that's Replay by Ken Grimwood. What Jeff Winston thinks is a heart attack killing him at age 43 turns out to be a kind of time loop, forcing him to repeat the past 25 years of his life. And only he realizes what's happening, no one else. With this future knowledge of the economy and world events, he can pretty much do whatever he wants. On his quest for happiness, he tries drugs, sex, alcohol, money, anything and everything under the sun that he can think of, but none of it works. So he tries influencing the world around him. It's like a giant playground to him. But he soon finds out that this repetition of the last 25 years isn't quite going as planned. That's because each time he dies, he's returning to a new moment in his personal timeline, and it's getting closer and closer to the present. In other words, he has less time for each replay of his life. What makes Replay even better is its two main characters, Jeff and Pam, who encounter these realistic pulls by spouses, kids, jobs, and life goals. It's kind of like the movie Groundhog's Day in a way, but the repetitious nature of it doesn't get annoying. Each 25 years is fresh, so it stays interesting. I didn't necessarily have all of my questions answered in the end, but the journey was really satisfying. Up next is Hawksbill Station by Robert Silverberg. In this book, political prisoners are sent like a billion years into the past, where they're isolated and can never return to the future. They're living in a time and place where not much is on land, but a few basic creatures are swimming around in the oceans, and their jailers from the future occasionally send back supplies and food. The main character is Jim Barrett, and he's the head honcho at Hawksbill Station since he's been there the longest, for 20 years. While some of the men keep busy thanks to their small roles in this prison community, and others keep busy by cataloging things that are swimming around in the oceans, most of them go crazy. Like some of them try to tap into their psychic powers in order to travel back into the future, and some of them build women out of dirt. They've gone nuts, mostly due to boredom and hopelessness. Then this really young, suspicious guy is sent back to them, back to Hawksbill Station, and he evades a lot of their questions, and he doesn't really seem all that passionate about his political beliefs, which all of them do. So the other prisoners start to suspect he's got some kind of secret that he's hiding. It's a multi-period novel that flips back and forth between Jim's transformation into a revolutionary in his younger years and then him now living at Hawksbill Station and beginning to question this mysterious newcomer. I will say it has an abrupt ending, leaving some questions still unanswered, but overall it's an interesting take on how time travel could be utilized by the powers that be. Number 3 on my list is The Girl with the Red Balloon by Catherine Locke. Say hello to a historical fiction fantasy novel that features magical realism and time travel. Ellie Baum is our time-traveling Jewish teen protagonist who accidentally winds up in 1988 East Berlin after grabbing hold of a red balloon. Has anyone else ever had that nightmare about holding onto a cluster of balloons for too long and then suddenly floating up into the atmosphere never to return? It's a legit fear, people. Anyway, Ellie is stuck in Germany during the Cold War and trying to figure out how to get back home. While in East Berlin, she finds this secret group using the magical balloons I talked about to help people escape across the Berlin Wall. And they're obviously her best bet at learning how to get back to the present. Although it has a slower pace than I'm used to, there's a lot to like about this book. That includes a diverse cast of characters, a fascinating setting in time, tear-jerking moments, and a dose of angsty teen romance because it's a YA novel, so what else do you expect? Up next is Pathfinder by Orson Scott Card. Okay, I'll admit that this book has a fairly standard setup. Teenage main character with a gift who's living in a crummy situation, and it seems like it's going to be pretty predictable, but it really isn't. The protagonist with the gift is Rig, and he can see the path of living creatures, living beings, where they've been through time. And after the death of his father, Rig sets out to find his long-lost sister and understand the truth about his powers. Combined with his friend Umbo's gift, which is slowing down time, they can basically travel back in time. And not only that, but when they're there, any actions that they take can influence the present. So this leads to them having to unpack all the time travel paradoxes like any good time travel book does. And running parallel to this main story are segments about a spaceship leaving Earth to find a new planet to live on. And clearly there's a connection between the two tales, but it's interesting to see exactly how. Despite it being a chunker at over 600 pages, it's surprisingly fast-paced, but also it'll twist your brain into knots while still seeming logical, so you don't roll your eyes in disbelief about what Rig and Umbo are getting themselves into. All that to say, it's complicated but well worth the effort to understand how the book nicely handles time travel and the history of the human race. Number 5 on my list is The Chronoliths by Robert Charles Wilson. Here's a really creative take on the time travel subgenre. Scott Warden is an expat living in Thailand when a massive, indestructible monument from the future shows up there. And this structure was made to commemorate the conquest of Earth by a mysterious warlord named Kun. Then more of these chronoliths, as they're called, to Kun's future victories start showing up all over the world. And the result is that people freak out. Now Scott becomes part of the team studying the Chronoliths, ultimately trying to figure out a way to defeat Kun before his rise to power. All the while, the author touches on the effects of mass fear, questions about free will, and how the future can shape the present. What's also great about this book is how you're constantly wondering what the twist will be and when it's going to come. Who's Kun? Can he be stopped? Or is the future just inevitable? Lastly, what a power move by Kun. Sending giant, unbreakable rocks back into the past isn't just an awesome flex. I know a hot dog when I see one, and that dude is loving the chaos his future touchdown dance is causing. What a jerk! Up next is The Man Who Folded Himself by David Gerald. All of our choices cause ripple effects that impact who we are and what we can become. That's the big picture overview of this pretty out there book. In it, a man named Dan is given a time travel belt by his uncle. So he does the usual, goes sightseeing throughout history, messes with some of the biggest events that ever happened, and makes a bunch of cash betting on horses. Dan works his way through the typical time travel scenarios and paradoxes as he tries to figure out if he has free will, if the past can be erased, or if the future can be rewritten. There's also a lot of Dan interacting with other versions of himself from different timelines and realities. Basically, he's trying to figure out what happens to his past and future selves if he tries something new. But also, in the process, he falls in love with himself, which got a little weird to say the least. However, if there's one thing I've learned from time travel books that dip into parallel worlds, it's that there are infinite possibilities, right? So a time traveler is bound to see himself as the perfect partner in a few of them. I'll be right back. I'm gonna go wink at myself in the mirror and see what happens. Next on my list is October the 1st is Too Late by Fred Hoyle. When plotted on a Venn diagram, this book's content is unlike any other. It sits in the middle of time travel, world geography, and classical music. Such a unique trio. Two friends, a composer named Dick and a physicist named John, realize that somehow the sun has messed with the Earth. Now different parts of the world exist in various historical periods. Ancient Greece is going strong, while Russia is thousands of years in some post-apocalyptic future. England is in the 1960s, and Western Europe is set right before World War I. So Dick and John start exploring this new world. Maybe they can stop World War I from ever happening, or maybe they should just go see what ancient Greece is like. Now Dick decides on the latter, and impresses the toga-wearing people of Greece with his mad piano-playing skills. And soon, these musical abilities land him in a musical duel with a temple priestess. It's a fun journey through times and places that latches onto this idea of human progress. Is it unending, or do we eventually peak? And the final question for Dick and John that they need to answer is, if you knew the future, what would you and what should you do with that knowledge? Number 8 on my list is Oona Out of Order by Margarita Montemor. Time travel is used really well as a plot device in this one, giving it a twisty, turny timeline for the main character, because the flow of Oona's life gets weird on her 19th birthday. She starts skipping around randomly to different points in her personal timeline for a year at a time. She doesn't know where she's going to go next. It could be the past, it could be the future. She just doesn't know. But this book is mostly about the relationships she forms, and how in the world is she going to maintain them with these annual jumps? The question becomes, how does a time traveler have a normal life? And what's kind of unique about Oona Out of Order is that there's no attempt to figure out why Oona is a time traveler. There's no explanation, no object, curse, or phenomenon that makes it possible. So the reader and Oona are supposed to just accept it and move on with the book. Up next is Permafrost by Alistair Reynolds. Here's a time travel book set in 2080 when the Earth has no more plants or animals. And the solution to climate change? Send an elderly woman's consciousness and some seeds 50 years into the past. Senior citizen gardeners, here's your moment in the spotlight. So this old lady's mind is placed into another person, and you better believe there's this intrusive body-snatching drama happening between the host and the uninvited brain guest. Yes, it can be difficult at times to follow as the two timelines alternate and paradoxes get resolved, but there's enough juice to keep you turning the pages. For instance, it's not 100% obvious whether the time travel tech is being used for good or evil, and that haziness really adds to the intrigue. Overall, this was an imaginative sci-fi story that builds momentum as it goes. But bear in mind that it's a novella, so the story is tight and the characters don't get tons of time to impress you or make an impression on you. The story is what's supposed to sparkle. And the final book on my list is Tau Zero by Paul Anderson. Imagine the brakes on your moving truck go out with you and your family stuck inside together. That's the basic gist of this book. A colony spaceship on their way to the new home hits a small nebula, disrupting the functionality of their decelerator. Now they can only speed up, they can't decelerate. Of course, as they get closer and closer to light speed, time for them becomes way different from time outside of the ship. They're zipping past planets, stars, and galaxies. Meanwhile, the universe's clock is ticking faster and faster. The ship's crew is in a rough spot. They need to remain socially and mentally stable while also trying to figure out their deceleration problem. These social dynamics between characters and hard sci-fi details were okay, but the psychological effects of the accident are what really sold me on this book. There you have it, 10 more underrated time travel books. Be sure to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what other books in this category you can think of that deserve more attention. Happy reading.